Hey, it's the next episode of Imaginarium in which I try to cover more content and talk faster with less rambling. Last time I may have seemed a little bit condescending about leveling up games like Pathfinder, OSR, and 3rd, 4th edition, and what I really just meant to convey was that if the mechanical components of the game that you're playing and kind of the incentives and drive that the game gives you and the players doesn't result in kind of an aesthetic and a feeling of fun that fills up your well, then it's going to kind of lead to a grayer game. I also may have been a little bit condescending about blogs, but I always wanted to interact with a wider community of enthusiasts of my hobby, and I don't really feel that blogs really engage a wide enough audience any longer, at least for me. So that's why I'm making this move. I set some goals last time about what this new campaign was going to achieve, and I didn't really talk about why I was setting those goals. First, because I wanted to progress my skills as a game master. I wanted to kind of do something new and possibly a little bit more mature. I wanted to break up the monotony and make sure that I do different things every time that I start a new campaign. And the last thing is just to climb the mountain to do more difficult things and to unlock new secrets. And that's kind of ultimately you're on a journey as a game master just as much as player characters are as adventurers. So what were the goals that we set? We wanted a feeling of scale, and the reason that we wanted that is so that we get to do and see new things. Mass combat, ship combat, things like domain management, having a castle for the players. These are things that a lot of games have a goal of, but if it's not going to computed into the thoughts of the story, then maybe it's not going to happen. Of course, Pathfinder Adventure Pass just actually write with mechanical method these elements into the particular campaign they're presenting, and I would say that that doesn't actually add a whole lot of choice. It does add mechanical complexity and creates almost a sub-game that maybe not everyone's engaged by. So it doesn't actually create engagement for the players in those other things. The other reason is just to be more congruent with literature, to be congruent with things like Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings and Kingdom of Heaven, things that have got really big stuff going on behind the scenes and on camera, and fantasy role-playing at its root in its origins, and the D&D origins is more of a Conan sneaking around in dungeons thing, and that was the literature it was referencing. Nowadays, people's brains are referencing a different body of literature. We wanted a sense of place, we wanted a sense of travel. The reasons for that are just because fantasy role-playing and tabletop role-playing are escapism, because it helps with suspension of disbelief, which leads to a better game. It makes you feel that you're not really playing a game, and instead that you're role-playing, or that you're actually otherwhere. And because you're competing with other things. There's competition with other media. People play Skyrim and Fallout, and they get a sense of otherwhere because those games are so good. So ultimately, your tabletop game maybe needs to incorporate those elements. I feel like mine does need to have that sense of transportation somehow. And I wanted a feeling of toil and a struggle, that things weren't easy to do. One of them is because fantasy role-playing is sort of about anachronism. It's about going back to the future. It's about sensing the present as if it were a different time. The other reason is just to try something different and to give people a sense of achievement when they complete a task. Video games are easy right now, and if something is hard to do, then you feel more like you've earned it. And the third reason is because it provides more of an incentive if you have to work 60 hours a week in the dirt with farm animals or go on adventures, and that's kind of the choices that are before you in life, then that makes the sensation of going on an adventure less gray and less reflexive. Because one of the things is that it's, if your character sheet says fighter, magic user, thief, then of course you're going on an adventure. It's not really a choice. So we've already decided that we're going to do a campaign that's in Celestia, possibly on the subcontinent of Harn, and we need to pick out a rule set. I would say that the rule set absolutely needs to incorporate the three basic classic archetypes of fighter, which looks like this, magic user, which usually is able to do this, and then thief, which ironically usually looks something like this. But maybe we don't need mechanical support from the system for clerics and for divine magic. Maybe it would be better if we just let the story and the institutions of the game and the world tell the story of religion rather than give them a free cookie. So Harn is about 3 times the size of Great Britain, and there's a lot of wilderness. We will probably need robust skill mechanics for overland travel. We will probably need from the system a meaningful sensation of risk in combat, and the idea that even if you have the upper hand, you may want to avoid confrontation by physical means, because things could be deadly. And so we need a crunchy and also risky combat system that still retains a lot of choice. We need the magic system to be more like magic than like a substitute for technology, because we can't break the medieval rules of the world. What are our options? Well, we ran our first campaign as a Hardmaster Gold campaign. It was a roll under D100 system, and it involved a lot of arithmetic, which players don't really like when they take penalties. It also had lots of layered rolling. However, it had nice organic progression based on talent. It had like 8 different basic stats for your character that told the story. It had a robust character creation system that involved a pregame where you told the story of the character's adolescence, and you gave the player a lot of choices that actually consulted with the world and with the storyteller's kind of ideas about where the campaign was going to go. And it allowed the players to make informed decisions that created a meaningfully complete character to start play with. However, our options on the table are unfortunately going to go elsewhere because Hardmaster didn't work out. Riddle of Steel is a robust D10 pool mechanic with a lot of tactical play. Its magic system is very freeform and very powerful, and I think would basically break some of the ideas of Harn, and it would make magic not enchanting, but instead very powerful and mythical. And I don't think that's appropriate. GURPS is a system that I'm very comfortable with. I've been playing it since I was 11 years old. However, it is a roll-under mechanic. It is layered. The source books are not tailored to fantasy, and your players look at the source book and get the wrong idea about what they're capable of. And it also involves a lot of layered rolling, and it is one of those systems that the players need to read the rulebook in order to succeed. Burning Wheel and Song of Ice and Fire role-playing are D6 systems. They are relatively simple, while also having a lot of role-playing flavor, especially in the case of Burning Wheel. Burning Wheel also has a lot of congruence with Hardmaster as far as its character creation. It has a free-forming sort of life path method that allows a lot of choice to be interjected, and also interjects flavor of the world, and I think is also very similar to Harn as far as what sort of world it is envisioning. Song of Ice and Fire role-playing would allow us to do a campaign where players have a lot at stake and maybe have that sensation of scale. They're both on the table. We're going to have to look at all these in somewhat greater detail. Rolemaster, RuneQuest, and Spellbound Kingdoms could be options, and I have access to them, but I don't feel that they're really a good fit. RuneQuest is very similar to Hardmaster and is also a roll-under system with a fair amount of mechanical complexity, and I don't think that with the pool of players that I'm probably going to be working with, that a system which is so dependent upon reading the rulebook is going to be appropriate. Rolemaster is a nice crunchy thing that is a lot like Pathfinder, has a lot of mechanics, but also has some realism and is a risky combat system. If your players are attached to 3.5-ish edition games, you might want to suggest Rolemaster as a progression if you want to move into an authored campaign. Spellbound Kingdoms is a nice free-forming kind of game. You only roll 1 die when you're doing things, And if your players really don't like rules at all, and you don't want to run Fate, that might be an option. And it also has a nice medieval flavor. Um, with all that in mind, we're not going to do Hardmaster because it's one of those things where the players need to read the rulebook, but also it also has lots of layered rolls where you roll and then you roll and then you roll just to resolve something once. And that I don't think is really appropriate to our table because people take a long time to roll, basically. And also, I like to keep the story moving at a pretty decent pace, so when I call for task resolution, I don't want the system to necessarily slow things down. Riddle of Steel engages my crunchy left brain. So does GURPS, and I know it very well. I know it by heart, and I could create a lot of content for it. It maybe would bring the most value to this series because I could publish that content. Burning Wheel is an awesome left brain system, right brain, pardon me, that involves a lot of role-playing flavor, and I think could really engage players and invite them to master a new system that isn't Pathfinder. Song of Ice and Fire role-playing is trendy, and also has all the things that I need as far as skills. Its task resolution is sort of simplistic, and I think maybe tasks are too easy to accomplish. And also it doesn't have a lot of quanta as far as character progression. You get better, good, better, and best, and then that's about it. And I'm not sure if that's enough leveling up to keep players engaged and on the table. I'm not going to consider those other options. In the next episode, the 4 ones that are on the table are going to get considered in detail. Thanks. Next episode of Imaginarium coming.